Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the UES Thunderstrike, staring at the endless void of space through the main view screen. The ship hummed quietly as it patrolled the outer edges of human territory, far from the warm glow of Earth's sun. 3 years had passed since he took command of this deep space reconnaissance vessel, and most days were filled with nothing but routine scans and empty space. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez looked up from her communications console, her dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of her screens. She had been monitoring the usual chatter from nearby systems when something strange caught her attention. A signal was coming through on frequencies that humans rarely used, and it was growing stronger by the minute. "Captain, I'm picking up something unusual," Amy said, her voice cutting through the quiet bridge atmosphere. "It's not from any of our colonies or ships? The signal is coming from deep space, and it's using galactic standard frequencies." Jake turned his attention to his communications officer. In all his years of service, they had never received a transmission from outside human space. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had always been told they were alone in their small corner of it. Other species existed, but they had made it clear that humans were not welcome in their affairs. "Put it through the main speakers," Jake ordered. Leaning forward in his chair, Chief Engineer Pete Williams looked up from his engineering station, his weathered face showing curiosity. Pete had served in the Human Defense Force for over 30 years, and he had never heard of aliens making contact with human ships. The transmission crackled with static as Amy worked to clean up the signal. The voice that emerged from the speakers was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was clearly not human, with strange clicking sounds mixed with what seemed to be desperate pleading. The universal translator worked to convert the alien words into something they could understand. "Please, anyone who can hear this message, we need your help. The Devourers have returned and our fleets are falling. Entire star systems are being consumed and we cannot stop them. If there are any species out there who can fight, please respond. We are dying." The bridge fell silent as the implications of the message sank in. Jake looked at his crew, seeing the same shock and confusion on their faces that he felt. Amy continued to work at her console, trying to trace the source of the transmission. "It's coming from the direction of the galactic core," she reported. "The signal is being transmitted on multiple frequencies, like they're trying to reach anyone who might be listening." "Captain, there are images attached to the transmission." Jake nodded, and Amy put the visual component on the main screen. What they saw made everyone on the bridge gasp. Massive ships, larger than anything humanity had ever built, were being torn apart by creatures that looked like a nightmare fusion of metal and flesh. The attacking forces moved like living things but gleamed with the cold efficiency of machines. Pete stood up from his station, his face pale. "Sweet mercy, what are those things?" The images showed planet after planet being stripped bare, their surfaces consumed by swarms of the biomechanical horrors. Refugee ships filled with beings from dozens of different species fled in terror, their weapons having no effect on their pursuers. Children of various alien races huddled together in the crowded ships, their large eyes filled with fear. "Amy, can you get more information about who sent this?" Jake asked, his mind racing with the implications of what they were seeing. Amy's fingers flew over her console as she worked to decode more of the transmission. "The signal is coming from something called the Galactic Council. It looks like there's some kind of government for the species in the inner galaxy. Captain, there's more to this message." Another voice came through the speakers, this one speaking in more formal tones despite the obvious desperation. "We know that there are species we have not contacted, those we deem too aggressive or unpredictable to join our civilization. We were wrong to exclude you. If you can hear this, please help us. The Devourers consume everything in their path, and we cannot stop them alone." Jake felt a cold anger building in his chest. These aliens had deliberately kept humanity isolated, calling them too aggressive while living safely in their perfect galactic society. Now that their civilization was crumbling, they were begging for help from the very species they had rejected. "Captain, I'm detecting more transmissions," Amy reported. "They're coming from all over the galaxy. It looks like this is a general distress call being sent to every corner of space. The main screen showed a map of the galaxy with red areas marking where the Devourers had already struck. The infected regions were spreading outward from the core like a cancer, consuming everything in their path. At the current rate of expansion, they would reach human space within months. Pete walked over to Jake's chair, his voice low. "Skipper, we need to get this information back to Earth. The brass needs to know what's coming." Jake nodded, but he couldn't take his eyes off the images of alien children fleeing their dying worlds. Whatever these species had done to humanity in the past, those innocent lives didn't deserve to be consumed by the mechanical horrors pursuing them. "Amy, prepare a message to Earth Command. Send everything we've received and tell them we're returning. Immediately. Pete, I want maximum speed back to Earth." As the Thunderstrike turned toward home, Jake made a decision that would change everything. Humanity had been rejected by the galaxy, called too violent and unpredictable for civilized society. Now that same violence might be the galaxy's only hope for survival. The journey back to Earth would take weeks. But Jake knew that Admiral Kate Sullivan and the Human Defense Force would need time to prepare. If humanity was going to answer this call for help, they would do it on their own terms. With their own methods, the stars streaked past as the Thunderstrike raced toward Earth, carrying news that would soon shake the foundations of human space. Behind them, the desperate transmissions continued, each one a plea for salvation from species that had once thought themselves superior to the aggressive humans they had shunned. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the war room deep beneath Earth's surface, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the galaxy's current state. Red zones marked the areas where the Devourers had already struck, and the expanding pattern made her stomach turn. Around the massive table sat the most important military leaders of humanity, all studying the alien transmission that had arrived 3 days ago. Colonel Ryan Foster leaned forward, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the table. "Admiral, we've run the numbers a dozen times. At their current rate of expansion, those things will reach our outer colonies in 6 months. We need to act now." Kate nodded, her mind already working through the logistics of what humanity had never attempted before. A full-scale military deployment beyond their territory, fighting an enemy they knew nothing about, to save species that had rejected them for centuries. The irony was not lost on her. "What do we know about their military capabilities?" she asked, turning to the intelligence officer seated to her right. Captain Bill Hayes had spent the last 3 days analyzing every piece of data from the alien transmission. The species in the Galactic Council fight with energy weapons, mostly plasma-based systems. Their ships are built for precision strikes and tactical maneuvering. They seem to prefer clean, efficient warfare with minimal casualties. Ryan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Clean warfare against things that eat planets. No wonder they're losing. Dr. Lisa Carter, head of the Human Research Division, activated her own holographic display. "I've been studying their military doctrine, and it's completely different from ours. They fight like they're playing chess, trying to outthink their opponents. Meanwhile, we've spent centuries perfecting the art of overwhelming destruction." The display showed side-by-side comparisons of human and alien military technology. Where the aliens had elegant, streamlined weapons designed for precise targeting, humans had created massive kinetic cannons that could punch through entire ships. While alien vessels were built for speed and maneuverability, human ships were armored fortresses designed to absorb punishment and keep fighting. "Their biggest problem is they're fighting an enemy that doesn't follow rules," Lisa continued. "The Devourers adapt to whatever tactics are used against them, but they've never faced an opponent that doesn't care about rules or honor or minimizing collateral damage." Kate walked around the table, studying the faces of her officers. "What you're saying is that our reputation for being too aggressive might actually be an advantage." "More than an advantage," Ryan replied. "It might be the only thing that can stop these creatures. While they're trying to adapt to logical military strategies, we can hit them with tactics they've never seen before." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Humanity had been excluded from galactic civilization because Other species considered them too violent, too unpredictable, too willing to sacrifice everything for victory. Now, those same traits might be what saved the galaxy. What about our weapons? Kate asked. How do they compare to what the aliens have been using? Dr. Carter's expression grew serious. Admiral, we've been developing military technology in complete isolation for 3 centuries. While they perfected energy weapons, we focused on kinetic force. While they built ships for elegant combat, we built them for total war. The display changed to show human weapons systems. Fusion bombs capable of cracking moons, antimatter missiles that could sterilize entire continents, and kinetic impactors that could punch through any known armor. The alien representatives who had seen these specifications during the initial briefing had been visibly horrified. They keep asking us about our rules of engagement, Kate said. About how we limit civilian casualties and protect non-combatants. I think they're starting to realize that we don't fight the same way they do. Commander Alex Turner, who would lead the first human fleet into alien space, spoke up from the far end of the table. Admiral, I've been reviewing their battle reports. Every engagement follows the same pattern. They try to disable enemy ships, capture prisoners, and minimize damage to surrounding areas. Against an enemy that adapts to their tactics, they're essentially fighting with one hand tied behind their backs. Ryan nodded in agreement. Our approach is different. We don't try to capture or study the enemy. We find the most efficient way to destroy them completely, and then we do it with everything we have. Kate turned to face the massive display showing human military assets, thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, and weapons that could level continents. For the first time in centuries, humanity would unleash its full military might against an external enemy. The aliens are expecting us to follow their rules, she said. They want us to fight like civilized beings, with honor and restraint. But that's not how we win wars. What are your orders, Admiral? Alex asked. Kate's expression hardened. We're going to show the galaxy what human warfare really looks like. No rules, no restraint, no mercy for an enemy that consumes entire worlds. We're going to fight exactly the way they said we were too dangerous to fight. The room erupted in activity as officers began planning the largest military operation in human history. Ships would be modified for extended combat. Weapons would be upgraded to maximum destructive capacity, and soldiers would be trained for scenarios that other species considered unthinkable. As the meeting broke up, Kate remained behind, staring at the galactic map. The species that had rejected humanity for being too aggressive were about to learn why aggression had kept the human race alive for so long. The galaxy had pleaded for help, and humanity would answer with the only language they truly understood: fire. Commander Alex Turner stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the Vega system grow larger on the main screen. Behind him, the largest human fleet ever assembled moved through space like a pack of metal wolves. 200 ships of various sizes, all bristling with weapons that the rest of the galaxy had never seen before. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell worked at her tactical station, analyzing the enemy formations ahead. The Devourers had been in the Vega system for 3 weeks, and the destruction they had caused was beyond anything the humans had imagined. 3 planets had been completely consumed, their surfaces stripped bare and converted into more of the biomechanical horrors. Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the enemy fleet, Sarah reported. They've got ships bigger than anything in our databases, and they're moving in patterns that don't match any known military doctrine. Alex nodded, his eyes fixed on the alien vessels ahead. The Devourers look like a nightmare combination of living tissue and cold metal, their ships pulsing with organic rhythms while bristling with mechanical weapons. They move through space like predators, constantly shifting and adapting to whatever they encountered. How many ships are we looking at? Alex asked. Approximately 400 vessels, sir. They range from small fighters to massive bioships that are easily twice the size of our dreadnoughts. The strange thing is, they don't seem to be following any formation we can recognize. Captain Danny Brooks piloted his fighter squadron in close formation with the main fleet. He had volunteered for this mission knowing it would likely be his last, but the images of alien children fleeing their dying worlds had burned themselves into his memory. If humanity was going to make a difference, they had to start somewhere. All ships, this is Commander Turner. Alex's voice crackled through the communications system. We're about to engage an enemy that has defeated every military force in the galaxy. They adapt to conventional tactics and learn from every engagement. That's why we're not going to fight conventionally. The human fleet began to spread out, not into the neat formations that alien species favored, but into a chaotic swarm that would be impossible for the Devourers to predict. Each ship captain had been given specific orders to ignore traditional military doctrine and focus on one simple goal: cause maximum damage to the enemy. Sarah watched her tactical display as the Devourers began to respond to the human approach. Sir, they're shifting their formations. It looks like they're trying to surround us and pick us off one by one. That's what they did to the other species, Alex replied. But we're not going to give them the chance to analyze our tactics. All ships, execute plan hammer. The human fleet suddenly accelerated to maximum speed, charging directly at the center of the Devourer formation. It was a move that violated every rule of space combat, but that was exactly why it might work. The Devourers had adapted to fight enemies who valued their ships and crews, not ones who were willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The first exchange of fire lit up the void between the two fleets. Devourer plasma weapons lanced out with deadly accuracy, but the human ships kept coming, their thick armor absorbing punishment that would have destroyed the elegant vessels of other species. In return, the human kinetic cannons spoke with voices of thunder, sending massive projectiles through space at incredible velocities. Danny led his squadron in a diving attack on one of the larger bioships. Unlike other species who would target specific systems to disable their enemies, the human fighters aimed for whatever would cause the most damage. Their missiles weren't designed to capture or study the enemy, but to burn through armor and destroy everything inside. This is insane, Danny muttered to himself as he watched a human cruiser ram directly into a Devourer vessel, both ships exploding in a ball of fire. But it's working. The Devourers were clearly confused by human tactics. Their bioships kept trying to adapt to the human attack patterns, but there were no patterns to adapt to. Each human ship fought independently, using whatever method seemed most likely to hurt the enemy. Sarah watched her display with growing excitement. Sir, the enemy is starting to fall back. They're not adapting fast enough to our chaotic assault. That's because they've never fought anyone willing to lose half their fleet just to prove a point, Alex replied. All ships, press the attack. Show them what human warfare looks like. The battle raged for hours, with both sides taking heavy casualties. But while the alien species had fought to preserve their forces, humans fought to win at any cost. Ship after ship charged into the enemy formation, their crews knowing they might not survive but determined to take as many Devourers with them as possible. When the smoke cleared, the human fleet had lost over 60 ships, but the Devourer force had been completely destroyed. For the first time since the ancient enemy had awakened, they had been defeated in open battle. Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the surviving alien fleets, Sarah reported. They're asking how we did it. Alex looked at the debris field, where hundreds of ships from both sides had died. Tell them we did it the human way. We didn't try to outthink them or adapt to their tactics. We just hit them harder than they could hit us back. Word of the human victory spread through the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time in months, the surviving species had hope. The aggressive humans that they had rejected for centuries might actually be able to stop the Devourers, but Alex knew this was just the beginning. The real war was yet to come. General Marcus Stone arrived at the forward command station aboard the massive UES Warhammer, his gray hair and scarred face telling the story of 30 years spent in humanity's bloodiest conflicts. The victory at Vega had bought them time, but intelligence reports showed the Devourers massing for a counterattack that would dwarf anything seen before. The holographic display in the command Center showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with red zones marking Devourer-controlled territory spreading like an infection from the galactic core. Representatives from dozen alien species stood around the table, their faces showing a mixture of hope and horror as they listened to Stone's proposal. "You want to attack their home territory?" asked Ambassador Zethkar, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. "No species has ever attempted to penetrate the galactic core. The radiation alone would kill most life forms." Stone's expression didn't change. Most life forms, yes. "But humans have been preparing for hostile environments since we first left Earth. We've fought wars in the vacuum of space on planets with toxic atmospheres and in radiation fields that would cook most organic matter." Dr. Kevin Harris, the xenobiologist who had been studying devourer biology since the first encounter, stepped forward with his findings. "General, I've completed my analysis of the captured biosamples. The devourers have a complex hive structure, with breeding worlds that produce new units and command nodes that coordinate their attacks." "And you want to destroy these breeding worlds?" another alien representative asked, his voice filled with shock. "Not just destroy them," Stone replied. "We want to sterilize them completely, make them uninhabitable for any form of life. It's the only way to stop the devourers from replacing their losses." The alien representatives looked at each other with expressions of disbelief. Captain Nicole Davis, commander of the new U.S. Hellfire, watched their reactions with amusement. These species had ruled the galaxy for millennia, but they had never faced an enemy that required total destruction to defeat. "Your methods are barbaric," declared Ambassador Valtar, an insectoid being whose species had been fighting the devourers for months. "Surely there must be a way to negotiate or find a peaceful solution." Stone's laugh was cold and bitter. "Peaceful solution? They've consumed entire star systems. They've killed billions of your people. And you still think there's a way to reason with them?" Nicole stepped forward, her hand resting on the holographic controls. "With respect, ambassadors, your people have been trying the civilized approach for months. How's that working out for you?" The display changed to show recent battle reports. System after system had fallen to the devourers, and the survivors were running out of places to retreat. The elegant tactics and honorable warfare of the galactic species had proven completely ineffective against an enemy that consumed everything in its path. "The human approach is different," Stone continued. "We don't fight to capture territory or win political victories. We fight to completely eliminate threats to our existence. The devourers are such a threat, so we will eliminate them." Dr. Harris activated another display, showing the weapon systems that humanity had developed specifically for the core assault. "We've created fusion bombs that can crack planets, biological weapons that target devourer reproduction, and kinetic impactors that can punch through their strongest bio-armor. Those weapons could destroy entire ecosystems," protested Ambassador Zethkar. "What about the innocent life forms that might exist in those systems?" "What innocent life forms?" Stone asked. "The devourers have already consumed everything. We're not destroying living worlds, we're sterilizing dead ones to prevent them from being used as breeding grounds." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The aliens were still thinking in terms of preserving life and minimizing casualties, while humans were focused on winning at any cost. It was a fundamental difference in how they approached warfare. Captain Davis brought up the technical specifications for the new human fleet. "Our ships have been modified with heavy radiation shielding and redundant life support systems. We can operate in the galactic core for extended periods, something no other species has ever attempted. The plan is simple," Stone explained. "We take a fleet of specially modified ships directly into devourer territory. We locate their breeding worlds and command centers, and we destroy them completely. We don't capture, we don't study, we don't negotiate. We burn everything and move on to the next target." The alien ambassadors exchanged worried glances. They had asked for humanity's help, but they were beginning to understand that human assistance came with a price. The species they had rejected, for being too aggressive, were about to unleash their full military might in the heart of the galaxy, What about casualties? Asked Ambassador Veltar. How many of your people are you willing to sacrifice for this mission? Stone's expression hardened. As many as it takes. That's the difference between us and you. You fight to preserve your forces and minimize losses. We fight to win, regardless of the cost. The meeting continued for hours with the aliens trying to understand human military doctrine and the humans explaining why their methods were necessary. By the end, it was clear that the galaxy's salvation would come through fire and destruction, delivered by the very species that had been deemed too dangerous for civilized society. As the representatives filed out, Stone remained behind with his senior officers. They still don't understand, he said quietly. They think there's a clean way to win this war, Nicole nodded. They've never fought an enemy that required complete destruction. They don't understand that sometimes you have to become the monster to defeat the monster. The fleet began preparing for the most dangerous mission in human history, knowing that many of them would not return. But they also knew that their sacrifice might be the only thing standing between the galaxy and total annihilation. Admiral Susan Wright gripped the armrests of her command chair as the UES Devastator led the largest human fleet ever assembled into the swirling chaos of the galactic core. Around her, 300 ships moved in tight formation, their hulls glowing red from the intense radiation that would have killed any other species within minutes. The journey had taken 2 months of fighting through Devourer territory, with human ships smashing through enemy defenses like hammers through glass. Each system they passed told the same story of complete consumption, with dead worlds stripped of all life and converted into breeding grounds for more of the biomechanical horrors. Admiral, we're approaching the primary hive cluster, reported Captain Tom Bradley from his sensor station. The radiation levels are off the charts, but our shielding is holding. Susan nodded, watching the main screen as the heart of Devourer territory came into view. What she saw made even her veteran crew gasp in shock. Dozens of massive biostructures floated in the void, each one larger than Earth's moon and pulsing with organic life. Between them, streams of smaller Devourer units moved like blood through arteries, carrying resources from consumed worlds to fuel the endless reproduction. Colonel Ben Rodriguez stood in the Marine staging area, checking his powered armor one final time. Around him, 10,000 human Marines prepared for what they all knew would be a one-way mission. The plan was simple: board the biostructures, fight their way to the breeding chambers, and plant fusion charges that would sterilize the entire complex. Remember, people, Ben announced over the comm system, we're not here to study these things or take prisoners. We're here to burn them out completely. Every breeding pool, every command node, every piece of organic matter gets destroyed. The first wave of assault shuttles launched from the human fleet, their armor glowing white-hot from the radiation as they approached the nearest hive structure. Devourer defenders swarmed out to meet them, but the human craft kept coming, their crews knowing that retreat was not an option. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Johnson led her battalion through the twisted corridors of the biostructure, her weapon cutting through Devourer defenders with precise bursts of plasma fire. The interior of the hive was like a living nightmare, with walls that pulsed like a heartbeat and floors that seemed to shift under their feet. This place is trying to adapt to our presence, she reported over the radio. The walls are literally growing new defenses as we move through them. Then we move faster, Ben replied from his position deeper in the structure. Plant your charges and get out before it can figure out how to stop us? The Marines fought their way through chambers filled with Devourer larvae, pools of genetic material, and command nodes that coordinated the massive fleet. Unlike other species who might have tried to capture and study these facilities, the humans simply destroyed everything they found with ruthless efficiency. Back on the Devastator, Susan watched the tactical display as her fleet engaged the Devourer home fleet. The enemy had pulled ships from across the galaxy to defend their core territory, but human weapons were proving devastatingly effective against the bioships. Their armor is adapting to our energy weapons, reported Captain Michelle Foster from the weapons station. but they can't adapt fast enough to kinetic rounds traveling at 50% of light speed. The human fleet had learned from their earlier encounters, using a combination of fusion missiles and kinetic impactors to overwhelm the Devourer's ability to adapt. Each ship fired everything it had, knowing that the mission's success was more important than preserving ammunition for future battles. Deep inside the hive structure, Amy's team reached the central breeding chamber, a vast space filled with pools of organic matter that stretched as far as they could see. Thousands of new Devourer units were in various stages of development, from tiny larvae to nearly complete bioships. "Jesus Christ," whispered Sergeant Mike Torres, staring at the scope of the breeding operation. "No wonder they keep coming. They're producing an entire fleet every few days." Amy activated her fusion charges, setting them for maximum yield. "Not anymore, they're not. Everyone out, we've got 2 minutes before this place becomes a miniature sun." The Marines fought their way back through corridors that were now actively trying to trap them, with walls closing in and new defenses sprouting from every surface. But human engineering had designed their armor for exactly this kind of environment, and they punched through the biostructure's attempts to stop them. "Colonel," Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm as his team completed their own mission. "Charges are set in the command center. This should cut off their coordination for the entire sector." One by one, the Marine teams completed their objectives and fought their way back to their extraction points. Not all of them made it out alive, but every fusion charge was planted exactly where it would do the most damage. Susan watched from the bridge as the first explosions began to bloom inside the biostructures. The fusion charges burned through organic matter like fire through paper, creating chain reactions that spread throughout the massive complexes. Within minutes, structures that had taken centuries to grow were reduced to cooling plasma. "All ships, fall back to minimum safe distance," Susan ordered. "We're about to find out if our plan worked." The explosions continued for hours, with secondary detonations as fuel stores and breeding chambers caught fire. When the light finally faded, the heart of Devourer territory was nothing but debris and radiation. "Admiral, we're detecting massive system failures across the entire Devourer fleet," Tom reported. "It looks like destroying their command centers has cut their coordination." Susan allowed herself a small smile. The mission had cost them nearly half their fleet and thousands of Marines, but they had struck a blow that the Devourers might never recover from. The galaxy's nightmare was finally beginning to end, burned away by human fire and determination. Captain Tony Garcia stared at the massive biostructure that dominated the center of the galaxy, its size dwarfing even the largest human ships. This was the Devourer Prime, the original nest that had spawned all the horrors that had terrorized the galaxy for months. Intelligence reports indicated that destroying it would end the threat permanently, but getting close enough to deploy their ultimate weapon would require a sacrifice that even hardened human veterans found difficult to contemplate. The remains of the human fleet hung in space around him, barely 50 ships left from the 300 that had begun the core assault. Each vessel showed the scars of countless battles, their hulls pocked with holes and their crews running on determination alone. But they had come too far to turn back now. Admiral Susan Wright's voice crackled over the communications system from her flagship, the battered UES Devastator. "All ships, this is our final target. Intelligence indicates that the structure ahead is the source of all Devourer coordination and reproduction. Destroying it will cut the head off the snake." Lieutenant Commander Frank Miller worked frantically at his weapons station aboard Garcia's ship, the UES Inferno. "Captain, the antimatter warhead is armed and ready, but we'll need to get within 1,000 kilometers for effective deployment. At that range, we won't be able to escape the blast." Tony nodded, having expected this outcome from the beginning. The antimatter device was humanity's most destructive weapon, capable of turning matter into pure energy on a massive scale. But it required close-range deployment, and the explosion would vaporize everything within a light minute of the detonation point. "How many volunteers do we have for the final run?" Susan asked over the fleet frequency. Every ship captain responded. Immediately, their voices filling the communications channel with offers to carry the weapon to its target. After months of fighting and watching their friends die, the prospect of ending the war was worth any price. "I'll take the honor," Tony said quietly. "The Inferno has the best armor and the most experienced crew for this kind of mission." But Susan's response surprised everyone. "Negative, Captain Garcia. We're all going in together. If this is humanity's final gift to the galaxy, then we're going to deliver it as one fleet." The engineering crews of the remaining ships worked frantically to weld their vessels together into a single massive battering ram. It was insane by any conventional military standard, but conventional military thinking had never stopped the Devourers. The combined structure would have enough mass and armor to punch through the biostructure's defenses and deliver the antimatter warhead to the heart of the complex. Dr. Kevin Harris transmitted his final analysis from the science vessel, UES Discovery, before it too joined the improvised ram. The Devourer Prime appears to be the original organism that spawned their entire species. Destroying it should cause a cascade failure in their collective consciousness, effectively lobotomizing any survivors. As the human ships locked together with welding torches and magnetic clamps, Tony found himself thinking about the long journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had been rejected by the galaxy for being too aggressive, too willing to sacrifice everything for victory. Now that same willingness to die for others was about to save every remaining life in the galaxy. The improvised ram began its final approach toward the Devourer Prime, its engine straining to push the combined mass of 50 warships. Devourer. Defenders swarmed out to meet them, but the human formation kept coming, absorbing incredible damage while pushing forward with single-minded determination. "All stations prepare for impact," Susan announced as the biostructure's defensive fire intensified. "Remember, we're not just fighting for humanity anymore. We're fighting for every species that ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of something better." The ram struck the Devourer Prime with the force of a small moon, punching through layers of organic armor that had protected the structure for millennia. Human ships disintegrated under the impact, their crews dying instantly, but the momentum carried the survivors deeper into the heart of the complex. Tony felt his ship shaking apart around him as they penetrated the final layer of defenses. "Antimatter warhead is in position," Frank reported, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Detonation in 30 seconds?" As the countdown began, Tony thought about the transmission that had started this whole war, the desperate plea for help from species that had once considered themselves superior to humanity. They had learned too late that sometimes civilization needed those willing to embrace barbarism to protect it. The antimatter explosion lit up the galactic core like a new star visible from 1,000 light-years away. The Devourer Prime and everything around it simply ceased to exist, converted into pure energy in an instant. Across the galaxy, surviving Devourer forces suddenly went silent, their collective consciousness severed by the destruction of their source. In the aftermath, alien species emerged from their hiding places to find a galaxy free from the nightmare that had consumed so many worlds. The price had been terrible, but humanity had paid it willingly, proving that their aggressive nature was not a flaw but a strength that could save others when all hope seemed lost. Admiral Kate Sullivan, watching the explosion's light reach Earth, months later authorized the deployment of new human fleets to patrol the galaxy's borders. The species that had once rejected humanity now begged them to stay as protectors, understanding finally that some threats could only be stopped by those willing to fight with fire. The galaxy was safe, but it would never forget the species that had answered their plea with such devastating effectiveness. Humanity had proven that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe was someone willing to die for strangers, and that lesson would echo through the stars for generations to come.